All right. So my screen is visible.
Yes.
All right. So good evening, everyone. In the last class, we have discussed about and finished up this Renaissance age, okay, which comprises of Elizabethan age, Jacobean age, Caroline age, and then Commonwealth period, or a period where in which Cromwell was actually the Lord Protectorate of England. Now, with that, I have also told you that there was this rise of with the end of the reign of um, Oliver Cromwell, there was this happy or merry welcoming of the monarch back in England. Okay, that's why we call this next age as Restoration age. Now, before I mean, go to this one, let me show you, I mean, again, a timeline, historical timeline. So, see, we have this, yeah. So after this restoration from 1660 to 1785, this whole era is known as the neoclassical period. Okay, this phase is called neoclassical period, which again consists of like that of Renaissance. The neoclassical period consists of the Restoration, the Augustan age, the age of sensibility, or this is also known as the age of, Enlightenment or age of Johnson. Okay. So neoclassical age or period is further divided into the Restoration, the Augustan, and the age of sensibility. Keep that in mind so that we will chronologically be reading about it in the next successive lecture. So in this particular lecture, we will be talking about Restoration age. So I have mentioned this in the last class also, how this age is called the Restoration age. So the restoration of 1660 was a return to the ancient form of government by king, lords, and commons. What was the ancient form of government? That there will be a king, there will be a monarchy, okay, who will be ruling, controlling an entire thing in the country. So they went back to that form of government because you see between the restoration and Caroline age, we have this Puritan regime, which is not a kind of monarch, but a kind of, he declared himself as Lord Protectorate and not as king. Okay. So it was a kind of autocratic kind of, you can say, government. It's not a democracy in fullest sense because Puritan, as I have already told you in the last class, they were, they never supported democracy. Okay. So the English, fed up with the constitutional experiments of the Puritans, welcomed Charles II back to the throne. Why they are fed up? Because of this experiment, because of this conservative thinking and very hard and fast rule made by the Puritans. They were completely, their dreams were completely shattered down. They thought that after the Charles first, this Puritan regime or Oliver Cromwell, he will came up with new ideas. He will give more liberty and he will give more happiness to the people. But that doesn't happen, and that's why they finally welcomed Charles II back after the death of Oliver Cromwell. He was extremely popular because of his good looks, wit, and good humor. Okay, Charles II was popular because of his looks, wit, and good humor, in which his exile in France played a very major role. Because, he's witty, he has this good humor, because that was the, characteristic of the French country. Okay, France. That was a kind of characteristic of that time. It was also happening in their plays, also French plays. So you will when you will see the Restoration theater, Restoration comedy, they have derived many of the ideas from the French witty comedies. Okay, so the term Restoration refers not only to the restoration of monarchy, but also to the restoration of the Church of England and of the old social hierarchy and customs. And extreme reaction was um, witnessed against the strict morality of Puritans. See, extreme reaction was witnessed against the strict morality of Puritans. So it was bound to happen because Puritans were very moral. They were full of this morality, code of conduct, and the way to how you are going to conduct yourself in the public and how you are going to devote yourself to the God. These were their main ideas. So this age will come, this restoration will be a kind of reaction against those. Because you see, with the coming of Charles I, the theatre were reopened, the first and foremost reaction, because theatre were closed during the Puritan age. So Puritan, with the coming of this restoration, theatre were also restored. The Act of Uniformity, 1662, was an important milestone in the marginalization of the Puritans. And although it was both political expedience and a religious reaction, such a move showed the attitude of the new regime quite early. Okay, Act of Uniformity was a kind of, exclusion of the Puritans. They were further marginalized. And that's why I have also told you, by the time it is 60s, 1660s and 70s, more Puritans started to shift or migrate to America. Okay, while I was telling you the history of rise of America. So if you haven't watch that video to better understand this. The reign of Charles II was also characterized by different kinds of turmoil, such as the Popish plot, which this was actually they wanted to overthrow Charles II. Okay, because his illegitimate child was there. So if you remember Absalom and Achitophel written by Dryden, this was influenced by this Popish plot, the attempt of Monmouth to come to power, and the party conflicts between the Whigs and the Tories. Tories who actually supported the king, and Whigs who were the supporter of Parliament. Okay, so these things, these historical events were happening at that time. Now, Restoration Theatre. Although it is said that the restoration of Charles II to the English throne synonymously coincided with the restoration of theatre, the process was not exactly done in the pre-Civil War sense. Pre-Civil War, Civil War was the phase between 1642 to 1651 in England, when Charles I was executed. Okay, so this the theatre were reopened. Obviously, it was reopened during the 1660s with the Restoration age, but then it was no more the same theatre which was there back then in 1642 or even before that. Because what happened is that Charles II granted William D. Evenant and Thomas Killigrew the monopoly to run two theatre companies in August 1660. Okay, unlike the previous situation where there were many theatres, you can just get the permission and you can open the theatre anywhere. That was not the case now. Charles II granted the permission to only two persons, and it was a kind of monopoly. The situation was slightly different from the earlier arrangement when several companies offered their fares. Now only the King's Company, which is, Company of Killigrew, and the Duke's Company, which was the company of the Evenant, had the license to be engaged in the theatrical activity. They are the only two companies who can conduct any kind of play or stage any kind of drama or play. No, no other than them can come up with any drama or stage play in the country. They have only the license given by Charles II. The theatre was city-based. Okay, yeah, this is one of the characteristic of Restoration Theatre. It was city-based. Okay, it will talk about aristocrat class. It will talk about the sophisticated class rather than the poor people. You will hardly see any poor character. Even if they are poor or servant, they will act very sophisticated. In a sophisticated way. So the theatre was city-based, and while the comedies made fun of the wealthy citizen and the country gentlemen, commentators have disagreements about how far such ridicule was designed to offend. Another change was the introduction of women actors in the part of the lady protagonist. So this is very important incident. This has been asked in UGC NET that for the first time, women were allowed to play the role of women. Women actors were allowed to play their part on stage in the Restoration age for the first time. Because if you know, before that, women were not allowed to perform in the theater. Instead of women, the role of women were played by men. Okay, so that is something which was completely new in the Restoration theater, and this question has been asked in UGC NET. Now, when William D. Evenant staged the Siege of Rhodes in 1661, he relied on the Romance tradition that was in vogue during the time of Beaumont and Fletcher. Okay, Siege of the Rhodes was the earliest play, you can say, during the Restoration theater. So he was very much dependent on the past plays that were happening in the 16th century. But then with the coming of this restoration comedy, you will say a new kind of comedy had which has been introduced in the restoration theater, which is completely different, a kind of shift or break away from the past comedies or tragedies. Okay. And so if you remember the plays like Country Wife or William Congreve's play, what was the name of the play written by very famous play by William Congreve? Do you remember?
Way of the world.
The Way of the World. Exactly. Very good. The Way of the World. So Way of the World, Sheridan's Rivals, these are all the very canonical kind of plays in which you see only upper class people, in which you will see that there is a kind of satirization of the upper class people, the morality of the upper class people. You will see they are giving priority to to money rather than love. Okay, love is at the backdrop of money. First, there will be money. Okay. So and also if you will see those scenes such as the engagement scene, such as the bargaining going on between two characters for marriage. So these are the scenes that you will see for the first time during the restoration theater. The Eminent is also associated with the introduction of heroic plays into the restoration theater, but it was actually Dryden who brought in the innovations and increased the genre. Dryden analyzes the characteristics of the genre in his essay titled of Heroic Plays, which was attached to the Conquest of Granada, where he comments on the use of resources derived from the Elizabethan as well as French theatrical practice of Corneille. Corneille was, by the way, a French playwright. Now, see, Dryden in his Of Heroic Plays, it is an essay which was a kind of, there as a kind of preface to the Conquest of Granada. Conquest of Granada is a tragedy. There was this preface called Of Heroic Plays where he talked about this, elaborated the heroic genre, okay, or heroic tragedy. So, heroic tragedy were more or less famous during this illustration theater, but it is obviously the comedy which were at the top. So, do remember and read all the comedies for UGC, those who are preparing for UGC. Then, it was in the 17th century that the scientific spirit first touched the English people. Now, this we will again read during the Enlightenment age, when I will be talking about Enlightenment age, that there were so many scientific discoveries were also going on. That's why we call it a kind of Enlightenment age. There is a kind of deviation. There will be the first, for the first time, there will be a clash between God and the science. Okay, God versus science. That will later cultivate in the Victorian age also, when Charles Darwin will write this very famous book, The Origin of Species. So that was a kind of pinnacle point, but it started from this time only, the flickering of faith. So scientific spirit first touched the English people. The Royal Society was founded in 1662 to encourage studies in physics and mathematics. In the field of mathematics, Newton developed infinitesimal calculus. He also contributed to other branches of science, especially physics. Okay, his laws, Milton's law. So his laws of motion and gravitation occupy an important place in physics even today. Because see, earlier what we believe that a fruit is falling from the tree to the ground because God is doing this. Okay, this was our notion. Everything happening because of the God, because of the supernatural power. But what Milton said, no, it is not God, it is the gravitational power. So obviously there will be this flickering of faith. You have a kind of notion throughout your life, and someone will come and via reason they will prove you wrong. So obviously there will be a kind of clash. So this is what actually happened at that time. Now, Robert Boyle gave us Boyle's law. Edmund Halley did a lot of research on the movement of comets, calculated the periodicity of the famous Halley's comet. In the area of human anatomy, William Harvey discovered the circulation of blood. So see, so many things were happening during this Enlightenment age. Now, another feature of the Restoration period was its strict censorship. This is very important because if you remember, on censorship, Milton has written a word. Okay, very famous work. John Milton has written it. So censorship were introduced in this time, where you have to get permission from the authority, from the king, in order to publish something. Okay. So the Cavalier Parliament, Cavalier who were the supporter of king, monarch. So obviously you will be remembering about these Cavalier poets. Who were the Cavalier poets? Can any one of you tell me? Quickly, who were the Cavalier poets? Just name them. I have already told you that Cavalier were the supporter of king. So there is this way I have told this to my students especially. There is this way to remember the Cavalier poets, a kind of mnemonic. So it is John love his car John. John love his car John. Ben Jonson, then love Thomas Lovelace or Richard Lovelace. I'm forgetting right now. So John love his. So it will be Harry, Robert Harry, Carr, Thomas Carew, John, John Suckling. Okay, these are the names. Cavalier for Cavalier poets. So the Cavalier Parliament passed the Licensing Act to prevent Puritan writing. Okay, and if you remember, John Bunyan and John Milton, they were Puritans. Okay, so they were Puritan. That's why I mean Milton was very happy before the Restoration, but once this Restoration age came, he lived in a kind of very poverty kind of stage. Okay, very pathetic life afterwards. He was blind. He was writing against this monarchy very indirectly in the form of Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, Samson Against. So this act was revoked after the Glorious Revolution. Okay, this act has been revoked because of this glorious revolution of 1688, where so Charles II has been, after the death of Charles II, he called his brother, but he has been overthrown. So this glorious revolution is also called bloodless revolution, because my voice is still breaking, Shubhadi.
No, sir.
All right.
Your voice is clear.
Okay. Initially, I mean, see, that's why I switched to this Zoom meeting, because that my voice was breaking and I was uploading those videos. That's why I switched to the Zoom. They allow at least 40 minutes of free, I mean, recording. So private libraries were very fashionable. Okay, this was also the time when private library were started to, I mean, rise. And see, this private library will later on, when I will talk about the rise of novel, these libraries will play a very important role. The printing press as well as the libraries, because people have that leisure time. Okay, leisure time when they were just sitting at home doing nothing. So for instance, back then in 2000, when there were no mobile phone, this 24 hours seems to be a kind of 1 month almost, isn't it? We were not able to pass out our time. But now see, with the coming of this laptop, mobile phone and TV, the days quickly wanes, quickly, very quickly. So that was, I'm talking about the 17th, 18th century. That time, there was no such multimedia and all. So the people have so much of leisure time. So what they will do with the coming of these libraries, the printing press, which makes the books easily available to the common people, this created this rise of novel, rise of, I mean, literature, literate people, education. Okay, so private libraries were very fashionable. Many fine country houses owned excellent libraries. Novel reading was considered to be fashionable among ladies. See, because more than men, women have this leisure time. They have cooked the food, okay, in 2 3 hours. After that, they are sitting at home whole day. So they started to read the books. And this is how you will see by the 18th century, women author also started to write the novels. Writing in diaries was another favorite pastime, and we have valuable record of daily life in the diaries of John Evelyn and Samuel Pepys. So John Evelyn's diary and Pepys' diary, these are sorry, these are very famous diaries, and question has been asked in UGC NET from these diaries also. So do remember. Now, another incident you can just remember for this sake, because see, from the first lecture onwards, I'm telling you that all the texts are somehow influenced by the incident of that time, historical incident. So Great Plague and next the Great Fire. You will see the reference of this Great Plague and Great Fire in Annus Mirabilis by Dryden. Okay, so obviously the texts are very much influenced by the historical event of that time. So there were two great calamities in the Restoration Age. One was the plague of London, and other was the fire of London. These calamities changed the lives and landscapes of the English people considerably. How? How does this changes took place? The Great Plague of 1665 was not the first instance of the disease in London, because you see from the time back in Chaucer, you can see the plagues are coming and going, coming and going. They are kind of inevitable case, like that of inevitable advertisement. So you will see that in 1348 there was this plague in London. So its germs were carried by fleas. How does this plague started to spread from one place to another? Because its germs were carried by fleas on the black rats that came into the country on ships from abroad. So the first time it attacked the people, it was very severe, as the people had no immunity against it, like that of COVID. Initially, we didn't have the immunity. Now we have all the vaccines and immunity. It is estimated that about a third to half of the contemporaries of Chaucer perished due to that epidemic. Once the bubonic plague came to England, it took root and broke out constantly in different localities, like that of COVID. COVID has not been wiped out from its root. It is still flourishing. It is coming back and again and again. Again, the cases are rising in Delhi. Last week I was in Delhi, so they were again started to fine those, or charging penalty for those who are not wearing mask on the metro station. So its root has not been wiped yet. That was the case. That's why this plague started to haunt the England and English soil again and again. During the reign of the Stuarts, it became rare, but the outbursts, when they did occur, were violent. There was one outbreak in the middle of the celebration of James I's accession. Another occurred when Charles I became the king. Okay, so see, these plagues were happening occasionally during the reign of James I, again during the reign of Charles I, and again during the reign of Charles II. After a gap of 30 years, a major plague swept the country in 1665. There is this very famous, poem, if you remember, Ringa Ringa Roses, isn't it? So this poem is actually based upon this great plague of 1665. See, Ringa Ringa Roses refers to the reddish sore that appear on the skin as a result of the infection. A pocket full of poisons refers to the medicines that a victim had to take. See, Ringa Ringa Roses, those reddish sores, and then pocket full of poisons means the medicines that you need to carry. The third line is reference to the chills and colds which usually accompanied the disease. The death of the victim is indicated through the final line, we all fall down. Ringa Ringa Roses, pocket full of poison, we all fall down. Okay? So see, this is, isn't it? It's a kind of interesting fact. Even I didn't knew until I read this. Then the next event is the Great Fire of 1666. The summer of 1666 had been very dry. So much drier that it caught a kind of fire. Obviously, it happened due to some physical or human mistake, but it happened. The Great Fire raged for 5 days from the 2nd to 7th September in 1666. In those 5 days, almost half of London was destroyed. St. Paul's and 88 other churches were destroyed. 400 streets and 13,200 houses were destroyed. The people had to rebuild the city again, brick by brick. So see, the Great Fire was even devastating. I mean, in comparison to the plague, it was more devastating. We have a graphic account of the fire in the diary of Samuel Pepys. How does he describe? He said that the churches, houses, and all on fire and flaming at once, and a horrid noise the flames made, and the cracking of houses at their ruin. See, this is how we describe this horrible picture. The fire, however, proved a blessing in disguise. Why? Because it wiped out the terrible plague forever from London. See, this fire actually wiped out all those carrier of the plague, and after that, no plague happened in England. So, blessing in disguise. It also gave the people an excellent opportunity to rebuild London in a new or very modernistic form. What is the score? Is anyone watching the match? No? So all the sincere students are here. All right. Mm. So, what are the common features of restoration comedy? Okay, so the satirical inclinations of the comic mode in restoration comedy, however, were not best represented by Dryden's play, but manifested in the dramas of Etheridge, Wycherley, and Congreve. Okay, satirical inclinations. I have also told you just now about this, that they started to satirize the upper class or the morality of the upper class or these themes. Whether they are doing it, I mean, to satirize the society or to just tell you the fashionable or the fashion of the society, it is not very much clear. It is still debatable. So George Etheridge's first success was comical revenge, but it is in his She Would If She Could that the typical feature of restoration comic tradition are best witnessed. So if you remember, George Etheridge is famous for these two comedies. Okay, comical revenge and She Would If She Could. The importance attached to the rational aspect of characterization was perhaps done at the cost of imaginative recreation of the dramatic elements, and characters like the Cockwoods are ridiculed through an appeal to reason. One of the allegations leveled against Etheridge is that he could not develop his plot convincingly enough, but then the situational interests were more important in his comic vision. Etheridge, George Etheridge plays are the Man of the Moon, which is also known as Sir Fopling Flutter. Now, Fopling Flutter is a very important character. Do remember and do read. I mean, this at least the summary of this play. See, the comedy, all the comedies written during this Restoration age are very important. You need to remember the title as well as some of the important characters and try to remember it chronologically. They are asking chronology from Restoration comedies also. So do remember it. And also I have seen some questions where they are asking the I mean characters. Characters are very important. So those who are preparing for UGC NET, do remember this. Extremely sophisticated in execution, this play, however, also suffered from the lack of compactness in terms of the plot. Now, William Wycherley, another playwright, he wrote this Love in a Wood, his first play, uses the frame of hypocrisy to subvert the pretensions of polite society. The digs at contemporary behavioral patterns were more convincingly portrayed in his next play, The Gentleman Dancing Master. So, if you remember in Gentleman Dancing Master, what happened is that the lover, the lady lover, called her lover and told her parents that he is actually the dancing master, but he was not the dancing master. He was his her beloved. So they started to make love, and the parents knew that he was just a dancing master. So this happened in The Gentleman Dancing Master. Like other plays in the tradition, this play too uses fast to engage serious issue like morals and manners within the conditions of comic prescriptions. In his other plays, the country wife and plain dealer, trickery and intrigue are given central importance. Then the age of prose. Okay. Before that, you have to read about William Congreve, okay, George Etheridge, William Wycherley, and in tragedy, Thomas Otway is there. So read those authors. Okay, I will also provide you the list of authors that is also available on the channel Litmania Literature. So you can get access of that list of authors. So those who are preparing for UGC NET, do read those authors in detail. At least the plays written by them and the characters. Now, 17th century as the age of prose. Okay, so it's a kind of I'm going little bit in the Augustan age also. I will come back again, but this is it. So in the prose area, you will see Thomas Sprat, Clarendon, and John Dryden, the important prose writer of that time. In the Augustan, you will see Richard Steele, Joseph Addison, then Dr. Johnson later on. So there were many, prose authors. That's why the 17th century is also called as the age of prose. So the prose writings of the Restoration period show the importance given to clarity of expression and preciseness of thought. Conditions that not only reflect the temper of the Enlightenment, but also highlight the rationalist foundation that was behind such a philosophy. Okay. Now the mood is shifting towards reason rather than just believing in what is happening, the supernaturalism. Okay. So Enlightenment age, these were the precursor of Enlightenment age, when you are moving towards rational ideas. One of the best example of this attitude is reflected in Thomas Sprat's History of the Royal Society. I told you that Royal Society was founded in London, which provides the appreciation to those who are working in the field of physics, mathematics, and science. So the Royal Society began functioning as an association of people who were united in cultivating the scientific temper and following the recognition by Royal Charter in 1662. It functioned as a platform facilitating scientific understanding. Okay, it's a platform where scientists can come, they can contribute their ideas. Technically, the Royal Society dealt with science, but the involvement of men from different professions brought in aspect of human culture into the attitude it came to represent as a distinctive one. Francis Bacon had already called for a plainer style, and John Dryden showed in his essay of dramatic poesy how ornament and intellectual content could be wonderfully organized in one whole. Okay, so we have Francis Bacon, who was a prose writer. Then in the 17th century, we have John Dryden, works of John Dryden. Okay, so we have seen Thomas Sprat's History of the Royal Society, that was also a prose. Dryden's dramatic poesy was a prose. And then we have Clarendon. Okay, first Earl of Clarendon, Edward Hyde. He has also written some historical prose works. So Clarendon provided an authentic picture of the conflict between the monarchy and the Puritans in his classic True Historical Narrative of the Rebellion and Civil Wars in England. Okay, so this is the title, True Historical Narrative of the Rebellion and Civil Wars in England. So this is the work written by Clarendon, first Earl of Clarendon. His name was Edward Hyde. Clarendon began writing this text in 1646. Okay, so these were the prose writer. That's it for Restoration Age. I will be talking in the next lecture about, the Augustan Age as well as the age of